All politics is identity politics. Welcome to Identity Politics, everyone. I'm Kevin DeAnna. Now, if there's one thing that is the constant theme of this show, the one thing that matters, the one thing I want you to take away more than anything else, it's that we either rally behind white identity or we lose everything. You absolutely will be governed by racists. The only choice you have, maybe the only choice anyone has ever had, is whether they're going to be yours or theirs. Because when people move into an area and build political power, doesn't matter where it is, doesn't matter what country it's technically in, doesn't matter the history of the place, doesn't matter the geography of the place, they claim it in the name of their people. Peoples who believe in themselves rule. Peoples who would rather be individuals are ruled. So, for example, this is the mayor of Norwich, Connecticut.
Norwich is the only city in America that have Sikh flag in the office, even before me.
The flag is a constant reminder of the mayor's faith right over his shoulder.
The faith actually plays a very important role, even while we tie the turban every day. It's a reminder to serve community. We are acknowledging 53 different cultural days.
Nowadays, the mayor's desk is full of planned events and recognitions for the community.
This office represents people of Norwich.
And reminders of his own values that he says got him here.
I want to make sure whatever we are doing to help people at the end of the day.
And look how the reporters can barely contain their glee. You'll never find a girl who loves you as much as a journalist loves a foreign invader, or a criminal for that matter. Now, white people, and white people alone, have been left out of this. However, Vice President J.D. Vance, who overwhelmingly won the straw poll to be the Republican nominee, had this to say at the recent TPUSA convention.
In the United States of America, you don't have to apologize for being white anymore.
Now, obviously, you can guess how progressives on X reacted to this, but there were two claims simultaneously. One is that white people should be apologizing. So you look at this exchange here. Got to be a decent heckin' human being and all that. But the more common one is that this never happened. Nobody ever asked you to apologize for being white. Nobody ever went after you just for being white. There was always something else. And this is just some random guy saying this, but there were a lot of people repeating this claim. Of course, you can usually find the exact same people who are making this claim, attacking white people themselves not that long ago. So some guy named Fred Wellman says, I've been a white male and no one asked me to apologize. But just a few months ago, he says, they made all the Joint Chiefs all white men. Disgusting. Well, yeah, when you're being told that it's illegitimate and wrong that you have a job just because you're white, yeah, that's being asked to apologize for being white. That's what it means. It wasn't long ago we saw that piece in Compact by Jacob Savage that made this big impact. And then you had the follow-up by Jeremy Carl Substack talking about how white millennials were basically shut out of white-collar jobs deliberately, especially in influential fields like media. Blue-collar workers already had this happen decades ago. Everybody was saying, oh, I can't believe that this is happening. I had no idea. Of course they had some idea. They've been talking about it for more than a decade. And all these big companies have been implementing explicitly anti-white ideas in HR training. Coca-Cola instructed its employees to try to be less white explicitly in HR seminars. Bank of America told its employees the United States was defined by white supremacy and you need to be woke at work. These are the capitalists that they tell us promote racism and divide the working class. No, these are the ideas that they actually promote. And then AT&T told its employees that they are the problem, told its white employees that they are uniquely the problem. And racism is a uniquely white trait. This is corporate America. These are the reactionaries. These are the capitalists. Now, Jared Taylor's going to accuse me of hyperbole. I might get in trouble for this if I say, like, this is all journalism now. Maybe not all journalism. Let's say a great deal of journalism in recent years. It's basically just finding ordinary things, flapping your wrist around, screaming, and saying that they're too white. Not because of anything they did, not because of anything anybody said, but not even because non-whites are excluded, but simply because they exist. And there just aren't enough non-whites in it. Something just existing and being predominantly white is a problem. That is what it means to have to apologize for being white. And there's a reason for this. There's a reason why they make these kinds of claims. Once something is identified as being too white, what do you have to do? You need a program to diversify it, which means money and jobs and power. And then you might also need to compensate non-whites. So it's in their self-interest to constantly be paranoid about these sorts of things. And this doesn't even include the countless articles attacking white people as such, saying we are responsible for all the world's ills. And if you want some real fun, just see how many stories there are about the unbearable whiteness of things. Just about everything you can imagine is unbearably white. Is it okay to be white? No, it is not. The ADL had "It's okay to be white" listed as a hate slogan. When people put up flyers with this, university presidents worried that it was making campuses unsafe. At Ohio State, the FBI got involved investigating who put up the flyers. And of course, the media was not exactly happy about it. And they said, oh, it's not okay to be white. It's not a joke. It's careless politicians endangering people. Actually, it's not okay to be white. Actually, this is a problem. Over the last few years, you had groups of whites in pseudo or explicitly religious ceremonies bowing to blacks, asking forgiveness, wearing shirts that said, "So sorry." I mean, these kinds of scenes were not that uncommon.
We know he's being God and he no longer can be here. In honor of his legacy, we're not rioting, God. We're not shaming anybody, God. We're just humbling ourselves before you. Yes, Lord. You brought the thunder and rain today, God, because Satan takes the L today. Father, in Jesus' name, you get the victory. Father, we ask for forgiveness from our black brothers and sisters for years and years of racism, of systematic racism.
What were some of the other things we saw? You remember taking a knee? You remember how many different people had to take a knee? It happened in Congress. It happened before sports games. It happened by FBI agents. It happened with the current British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. It happened with the Canadian government. What does it mean when you get on your knees before someone? In all of human culture, in all of time, what does it mean to get on your knees before someone? What possible relationship is that trying to convey? Total mystery, but no one asked you to do that. It never happened. Celebrities made tearful videos talking about how we all need to take responsibility for fighting racism, and we must not make jokes, and we must not let other people make jokes, and I will not allow other people to make jokes in my presence, and killer cops are murderers, and it's black and white, and it's all very dramatic, and they're crying, and look at it. Look, aren't you so sad?
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility for every unchecked moment.
For every time it was easier to ignore than to call it out for what it was.
Every not so funny joke. Every unfair stereotype.
Every blatant injustice, no matter how big or small.
Every time I remained silent.
Every time I explained away police brutality. Or turned a blind eye.
I take responsibility. Black people are being slaughtered in the streets, killed in their own homes. These are our brothers and sisters.
Our friends, our family. We are done watching them die. We are no longer bystanders. We will not be idle. Enough is enough.
I will no longer allow an unchecked moment. I will no longer allow racist, hurtful words, jokes, stereotypes, no matter how big or small, to be uttered in my presence.
I will not turn a blind eye. Going for a jog should not be a death sentence. Sleeping in your own home should not be a death sentence.
Incidentally, whenever I see actors, I always think of this rather obscure right-wing book called Men Aren't War. This is just a random plug. I don't know the author. And there's this one story where actors and journalists are rounded up after a revolution by the new traditionalist regime, and they're denounced as mouthpieces. And that term has always stuck with me. They're just minstrels. They defend corrupt power. They denigrate an entire people. And it's hard not to think of that right now. Like, they know what they're doing, and there are consequences to this kinds of speech, but they're just mouthpieces. They're just meat puppets animated by signals coming from on high. But the problem is there are a lot of people like this, and yeah, they really do have an impact. I mean, look at publishing. Look at books in recent years. What is it? just a tedious list of attacks on white people. I'll just name a couple titles. White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, White Fear by Roland Martin, America's Original Sin by Jim Wallace, White Privilege by Paula Rothenberg, Mediocre, The Dangerous Legacy of White Male America by some Star Wars name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, White Privilege by Shannon Sullivan, White Privilege, The Myth of a Post-Racial Society by Calwent Bopal, Understanding White Privilege, that one's a textbook, White Male Privilege, White Christian Privilege. These are all separate titles. And there are countless more. This is everywhere. One of the guys here, White Like Me, you might see that title there. This is, of course, Tim Wise. This is his job. He goes to campuses, he complains about racism, he tells white people how evil they are. This is what he does. This is where your tuition money goes. Here's him telling us why it's not okay to be white, for example. Oh, but it's for your own good. It's education. Actually, we benefit from this. But these are some of the things that he said over the years. He talked about maggots, in his term, need to be arrested and their children need to be made effing orphans. He said that if Moore wins, Roy Moore, former Republican Senate candidate, it's time to destroy white Alabama like we should have done 150 years ago. Now, of course, if the Yankees did burn it to the ground, it couldn't look any worse than modern Selma looks today post-integration. But the thing that really sticks with me is all the way back in 2010, after the GOP won the midterms, and this is the 2010 GOP. This is the party that had nominated John McCain. Even then, he was out there saying, well, they're basically a white nationalist party. And this is what he said after that election. There's this long rant, and it concludes basically, we just have to be patient and wait for your hearts to stop beating, and stop they will. And for some of you, real damn soon, truth be told. Do you hear it? The sound of your empire dying, your nation as you knew it ending permanently? Because I do, and the sound of your demise is beautiful, unquote. Now, I mean, I don't think he counted on what younger whites are going to be like compared to the boomers that he's so eager to kill off. But this didn't end his career in 2010. This is what made his career. This is why he gets paid. This is why he gets to lecture you. This is why he gets to have power over you. This is how it works. But we are told, no, you share common interest with this person. You have something to gain from this. A few episodes back, we showed Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart was lecturing Americans, oh, we're all just individuals. Oh, you can't possibly have certain qualifications for people coming into the country. We have to judge people as like a random new case every single time they come up. Well, no, actually, he believes in collective guilt for white people. He wants us to pay reparations. He thinks white people are the problem. This is typical of all of them. Ibram Kendi, sold to us as a public intellectual, recipient of the MacArthur Genius Grant. He doesn't just promote the usual ideas about white privilege or whatever else, but you also get things like anti-racist baby. If you go to any bookstore, you're going to see something like this. Goodnight racism. You're going to see this kind of thing. This is how your kids are brought up. It starts in infancy. Matt Walsh did a documentary on whiteness. He snuck into one of those dinners where wealthy white women pay money for nons to lecture them about how evil they are. You tell me if this sounds like they're being asked to apologize for whiteness.
My husband's black, so it can be an everyday white supremacist thing. Like if I'm out in public and he's like really loud or something and I'll shush him.
Why do you do that?
Usually because we're in a space that I think should be quiet, which is probably my white supremacy talking.
So that's basically tone policing, a black person who happens to be your husband. Okay. Who's next?
This one mom starts going on about how her white son is so screwed. Been rejected here, and white boy, white boy.
All right, white entitlement, white centering, tone policing, white silence. White women owned slaves, period. That's what it is. Let's be clear what's happening in this country. It's Nazism. Republicans are Nazis. I assume it sounds like everyone here is probably not a Republican. I might be wrong. Am I wrong about is there any Republican at this table? You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people. The proliferation of guns has happened every time whites feel terrified of black and brown people, which is literally every 10 seconds, but also when there's an event like Obama, like Ferguson, like 9/11, like COVID-19, like George Floyd, thank you. You've been killing all of us. Right? Primarily black folks, and we're just right behind, right? There's the hierarchy. Whiteness is even more insidious than I even knew even a year ago. And whiteness also robs you of your brain.
Incidentally, The non-talking there is Saria Rio. This is a former Democratic congressional candidate. These are some of the things that she said over the years. I want you to look through these. Okay? This is all mainstream. This is how almost all of them think. And I'm not even sure about the so-called exceptions. In the back of my mind, I think this is how they all view us. And I'm not trying to be flippant. This is how all our kids are raised, from birth to adulthood, by schools, by television, by churches, by the colleges, by the politicians, even by sports. And it has consequences. We had Jason Kone on here a couple episodes back, and he was recounting how many videos you see of kids coming out of school crying, being told they're ashamed to be white. They wish they weren't white. They don't know what it means by all these people they've been told to trust and they defer to respect their authority and whatever else. But they know that they did something wrong just by being born a certain color. Why do white kids get on drugs? Why do white kids off themselves? Why do white kids tune out? Why do white kids drop out of society altogether? Because they're doing what they're told. This is what the system does. This is what our rulers want. This is what it is designed to do. The purpose of a system is what it does. Think of academia, the great and the good. This is the system you have to go to get a good job. What is academia at this point, other than training people in inventing grievances against white people and then getting money out of us? I mean, this is how you make money now. You can't actually just start a business. You have to figure out a way to have the government loot white people on your behalf and give it to you. Ethnic studies, African studies, whiteness studies, which despite the name is mostly just about attacking white people. What is this? Other than being trained to attack white people. Like, this is how it is. This is all higher education is. And these are the sorts of products that are just sold normally. And we take this for granted. And we could just go on and on here. We could do this for weeks. Every day, a whole spate of articles. The witch hunt never ends. And yet, what is the big story right now? They're going after J.D. Vance for not doing enough disavowals. Not doing enough denunciations, not going in for the long history of purges on the right that defines the failed American conservative movement. What did President Donald Trump teach us? What is the one thing that he showed? If you disavow every single time the media tells you need to disavow, you're never going to do anything else. You're going to demoralize your own supporters. You're not going to get any credit anyway. It didn't do John McCain any good. It didn't do Mitt Romney any good. Why would it do Donald Trump any good? Why would it do J.D. Vance any good? Why would it do you any good? Vice President J.D. Vance said Sunday, the conservative movement should be open to everyone as long as they love America, declining to condemn a streak of anti-Semitism that has divided the Republican Party and roiled the opening days of Turning Point USA's annual convention. After a long weekend of debates about whether the movement should exclude figures such as bigoted podcaster Nick Fuentes, Vance came down firmly against purity tests. I didn't bring a list of conservatives to denounce or deplatform, Vance said during the convention's closing speech. Turning Point leader Erica Kirk, who took the helm after the assassination of her husband Charlie Kirk, has endorsed Vance as a potential successor to President Donald Trump, a helpful nod from an influential group with an army of volunteers. But the tension on display at the four-day gathering foreshadowed the treacherous political waters that Vance, or anyone else who seeks the Republican presidential nomination, will need to navigate in the coming years. Top voices in the Make America Great Again movement are jockeying for influence as Republicans begin considering a future without Trump, and there is no clear path to holding his coalition together. This is all from the AP, I think. And then a little later we learn Vance didn't name anyone, but his comments came in the midst of an increasingly contentious debate over whether the right should give a platform to commentators espousing anti-Semitic views, particularly Fuentes, whose followers see themselves as working to preserve America's white Christian identity. At least they concede what it was. Fuentes has a growing audience, as does top-rated podcaster Candace Owens, who routinely shares anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. We have far more important work to do than canceling each other, he said, J.D. Vance. Vance ticked off what he said were the accomplishments of the administration as it approaches the one-year mark, noting its efforts at the border and the economy. He emphasized efforts to end diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, drawing applause by saying they've been relegated to the dustbin of history. In the United States of America, you don't have to apologize for being white anymore. Now, a couple points here. One, notice how they lump Candace Owens, who's out there spreading so much nonsense that Alex Jones is fact-checking her, with Nick. So they're trying to lump those two together as equivalent, which they're not. Two, notice that they're setting up J.D. Vance as almost an ally of Nick Fuentes. Now, anyone who has watched America First at any point in like the last 2 years knows that Nick is probably Vance's biggest critic on the right. You could say like, okay, there's no real alternative, but he's not exactly a fan. But look at how the press reports it. Actually, they're basically equivalent. Actually, this is the racist bloc on the right. Actually, they're de facto allies. It's actually an attack on both of them because it's mischaracterizing both of their positions. And three, what are they trying to do? They're trying to get him into attack one person more than he already has in some ways. And, you know, leaving aside why he shouldn't, even if he did, even if he obeyed them, if J.D. Vance like disavowed and did it very performatively more than he already has, it wouldn't end there. There would just be somebody else you have to disavow. And look at where the Democrats are right now. Tim Walz, who incredibly probably thinks he's going to be president, said Vice President Vance's comment was evidence of white supremacy.
So this is what happens when your own federal government wages war against you. This is what happens when they target communities for their own benefit. This is what happens when they scapegoat. And this is what happens when they no longer hide the idea of white supremacy when you hear the Vice President of the United States talk about now white people won't have to apologize for being white. That's never happened once in my whole damn life. And I think everybody in this room knows what they're doing. So we're here today to say enough of this. We're here today to stand that Minnesota will protect their neighbors.
Yeah, Tim Walz. Oh, this never happened to me. I never had to apologize. Yeah, it never happened to him because his whole persona is the fat, goofy, effeminate, stupulous, harm white doofless that you see in every TV commercial, every sitcom, every supporting role. Remember him during the presidential campaign talking about white guy tacos with mayo with Kamala Harris, hesitated to send in the National Guard when Minneapolis burned in 2020, said, this is the thing that everybody forgets. He said explicitly, there is no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially about our democracy. So there goes the First Amendment. Oh, by the way, new requirement in all Minnesota K through 12 schools. If this doesn't prove my point that all politics is identity politics, I don't know what will. This is from the Center for the American Experiment, an article by Katrin Wigfall, and I quote, beginning in fall 2026, Minnesota public schools will be responsible for determining how ethnic studies is implemented in K through 12 classrooms. Public high schools will have to offer an optional ethnic studies course, but all grade levels will be required to teach the state's revised K through 12 social studies academic standards that include 3 ethnic studies concepts: identity, resistance, and ways of knowing and methodologies. The definition of ethnic studies created by the 2023 Minnesota legislature is designed to promote a critical and liberated framework, positioning ethnic identity and history as content to be interpreted through a prescribed ideological lens. To support this version of ethnic studies, the University of Minnesota's Center for Race, Indigeneity, this is a new one, Disability, Gender, and Sexuality Studies is turning the new standards into free lesson plans for school districts. Isn't that kind of them? RIGG's self-described mission is to challenge system of power and inequality and imagine social transformation. And a little later we learn, the lesson plan's video resources include one on George Floyd Square produced by Unicorn Riot, a nonprofit left-wing media collective that films Antifa and Black Lives Matter demonstrations nationwide. Students will work through a Black Lives Matter Principles activity book, which features all 13 Black Lives Matter principles and definitions. These principles include the organization's views on areas such as families, quote, disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family structure, and transgender affirmations to dismantle cisgender privilege. The activity book also states that some systems, like schools and jails, have white supremacy built into them because white people have had so much power for so long. Additional content emphasizes the goal of dismantling multiple systems of oppression, including capitalism, patriarchy, anti-blackness, and white supremacy, unquote. Now, the thing is, one thing in passing, Unicorn Riot I knew when I started off, like decades ago, when I was dealing like with Youth for Western Civilization, before Barack Obama was president. It's not just some media company, it's just Antifa. Like, that's what it is. But now, they're teaching your kids. This is the system. There is no resistance. This is the system. This is the establishment, especially in the education system. And this is what the education system exists to do. Now, according to the same group, Center for the American Experiment, solid majority of Minnesotans now give school performance a C or worse, and parents give schools a worse response than non-parents. But again, though, this doesn't even register. In fact, teachers in Minnesota's largest school district are about to go on strike again. It doesn't matter if the schools are collapsing. Doesn't matter if the kids don't know math or English. It's probably illegal to teach them English now. In the eyes of the people who run things, what does school exist to do? It exists to racially indoctrinate whites into self-hatred and to indoctrinate non-whites into white hatred. That's it. That is what it's for. And the end product is stuff like this.
Support everyone, and because people deserve to be here, because we shouldn't be illegal when this is literally stolen land.
And part of this too, and again, in Minnesota, they're linking this to a white supremacist agenda supposedly exemplified by the vice president in interracial marriage, saying that you don't have to apologize to be white, and that's enough. They're also magically just exempt from immigration laws. You just don't have to do it. Why? Because they're racist. So St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter says having to carry papers is reminiscent of Jim Crow.
When I look at my neighbors on the east side of St. Paul and see them worried, Bishop, before they leave the house, to make sure they have their papers so they're not harassed by law enforcement, I recognize that. I recognize Jim Crow. I recognize apartheid. You show me an era where people had to carry papers to keep from getting harassed and arrested by government agents. I'll show you an era of profound human rights abuses.
Now, of course, carrying papers is so bad. This was one of the biggest guys who was all about vaccine passports and everything else, Tim Walz. This is the same governor who set up a snitch line so neighbors, he loves using that word neighbors. Yeah, your neighbors get to snitch on each other for COVID restrictions so the government can come after you. That's what they mean by community. You need an ID to practically do anything in this country. None of these people want to repeal any of the regulations. None of these people want to make it harder for the government to track what you're doing. Tim Walz is on record that he wants the government to regulate what you can say, but too much to ask illegals for an ID. Why? That's linked to race. And you can talk about, well, it's really about the rule of law and it's about civic nationalism. And, if we don't have borders, we don't have a country. It's not really about race. Yeah, that is basically true. That is right as far as it goes. But in the political sphere, in terms of what motivates people, it's entirely about race. And that's the only thing they care about. When we talk about apologizing for being white, yeah, as we've seen, it can be literal. But in the broader sense, to apologize for being white, it's this idea that if you are white and you're holding or seeking power, you're enjoying prosperity, you have a country, you're enforcing laws if they affect non-whites in any way whatsoever. Any of these things are automatically immoral or illegitimate. That's what it means to apologize for being white. And the people preaching this kind of thing generally are personally benefiting if you believe what they tell you. Again, in politics, first thing when you hear anything, first thing you should ask yourself when I say something, how does this person benefit if I believe what he's telling me? Politics is about power. Morality is a will to power. When somebody says this is what you should believe, what they want you to do is behave in such a way that they are going to benefit from it. That is what this is about. And for someone like Tim Walz, obviously it's political power. For the Democrats, it's protecting a political base that's going to vote for them no matter what. For this so-called community of Somalis, they get away with their corruption. They enjoy patronage that whites do not. And this is now being done on purpose. Fox News had this really interesting article a couple days back from David Marcus talking about how white guilt and apathy are fueling this corruption. Now, I hate sort of anecdotal incidents where they say, oh, well, I talked to some people and these are the interviews. But this rings true when you see it over and over and over again. It's worth quoting. Ann is white, in her 30s, and works in tech, as do many in Minneapolis. I talked to her on the Skyway because outside it was cold as the planet Hoth. Maybe that was a reference to the Star Wars name meme. And when I asked about the massive fraud scandal involving the Somali community, she had a telling response. It's hard to care much about it when ICE is disappearing Somalis on the streets, she said. Notice in passing that even she recognized that these are just Somalis. They're not Americans. They're not even Somali Americans. They're Somalis. But because they're Somalis, that's why they need to be protected. Continue. This was, in fact, rather loquacious compared to most people I spoke with or tried to speak with about the issue. The vast majority simply shut down at the mention of the topic. Most faces took on an expression that seemed to say, we don't talk about that. While there were a handful of Minnesotans I met who expressed real frustration over the Somali-linked feeding our future bilking the government for millions, it was by far the minority. Interestingly, the only people I met who would directly criticize the Somali community were Hispanic. The alt-right is a Hispanic movement after all. Jack was a good example of this attitude from the white population. A late millennial, and again a software engineer, he said, lots of people commit fraud, so why are Somalis being singled out? He would eventually add, I don't even really know what assimilation means. This attitude, a mixture of white guilt and apathy, was also clear in Cedar Riverdale, the locus of the Somali community. On the faces of the few remaining non-Somali businesses, we love our Somali neighbors, blasted the marquee at the Cedar Center for the Arts, unquote. Or consider these Democratic state senators apologizing to Somalis. They're literally crying, condemning the president because of the behavior that's been highlighted. And again, it's about $7 billion in fraud so far. Some are even saying $9 billion. It's probably going to end up way, way more. But it's because this fraud took place that they want to defend these people. Check it out.
Whether you are in my Senate district or not, I am here to tell you how much we are in support of every one of you. And with my colleagues, we are heartbroken by the horrible actions of our government. And we want you to know that at the state level, we will do all that we can to support you. Whether you live in our district or not, we are here. We bring greetings from all of our Senate DFL colleagues, including my House partner, Patty Acom, who wishes she could be here, but she's not. So please reach out to us. Whether you live in our district or not, if you have friends, relatives, anyone who needs our help, we are 100% committed to helping you. You are welcome here. You belong here. And we are here for you. I apologize. I have to leave for another commitment, but we are here. Senator Swedzinski, Alex Falconer, and I will do, and the mayor, we will do all that we can to support you, protect you, and help you as needed. So please accept that and know how much we care about you and are glad that you are here.
Now again, when you talk about the rule of law, when you talk about individualism, when you talk about civic nationalism, when you talk about we're all Americans, it has to lead to this point. Because when you see things that contradict these assumptions, you don't change your mind, especially when your political and financial self-interest depends on you not seeing the facts before your eyes. What do? You double down. You turn your rage on the people who pointed out the problems. To most liberals, the problem is not that there is billions of dollars in fraud. It's not that Minneapolis is Mogadishu. It's not that Ilhan Omar is out there proudly proclaiming she's not here to represent America. It's that people like us are noticing it, and we shouldn't be allowed to notice it, and we certainly shouldn't be allowed to talk about it. Lawrence Oster, First Law of Minority-Majority Relations. The worse any designated minority or alien group behaves in a liberal society, the bigger become the lies of political correctness and covering up for that group. The more egregiously any non-Western or non-white group behaves, the more evil whites are made to appear for noticing and drawing rational conclusions about that group's bad behavior. Why? Because once the equality of all human groups is accepted as a given, and it is a faith-based claim, any facts that make a minority or a foreign group seem worse than the majority native group must either be covered up or blamed on the majority, usually on white supremacy. You have to believe this. You have to believe this. You have to hold this as a religious commandment, because if you don't, everything is up for grabs. And then where will you be? If you're a normal person and you notice something like that, like a chess game or something, most people can see like 2-3 moves ahead. If it ends up with the conclusion that the racists are right, what even are you? What's your whole life been? And if we make fun of people who believe in like liberal creationism, or the idea that, oh, young earth creationism is so stupid, but evolution doesn't apply to human beings. There are just no human differences. There are no racial differences in intelligence. But it's actually beyond that now. We're not just talking about racial egalitarianism. You now have people who probably have high IQ, people who are educated, people who are professional, people who are wealthy, people who have more power than you and I. They are now saying there are just no human differences at all. There are no genetic differences at all between groups of people. There are just no human groups whatsoever. We're going back centuries and denying even the existence of genetics. Am I exaggerating? Well, take this interview, for example. It's not even an interview. It's just a hysterical reporter lecturing people. And you're like, well, who is this reporter? This is Jorge Ramos's daughter. Jorge Ramos was like the main Spanish language anchor on like Univision who confronted Trump on immigration during the first campaign. This is his daughter. So this is somebody who you know, all the elite connections, wealthy, great education, probably high IQ. This is his spawn. This is what she says.
You've said things like, Black women are biologically different than white women.
Yes, they have different fertility windows. They have a higher rate of fertility complications, 50%
But there's
higher
no scientific evidence to prove that a black woman and a white woman are genetically different, right? This is like...
What are you talking
No, they are.
about?
According, No,
But literally, there are genes that code for their skin color. There are genes that...
Again, this is like government data. This is EMI, right? This is the National Institute of Health. This is the American Medical Association. Like, there is no scientific evidence to prove that.
And that's a big problem, right? Because
no,
a lot of
there's no scientific
and that's
evidence
why I
about
asked.
things like IQ differences. Black people are genetically different from other populations.
And I'll say that again. There is no scientific evidence to prove that, right? And as people
I'm sorry, I'm stating, do you want to ask an AI if there's scientific evidence to prove that?
No, I want to ask,
Because what you're stating is just factually incorrect. Humans are genetically diverse. It's not a bad thing that humans are genetically diverse.
I'm not saying it's a bad or a good thing. I'm saying there is no scientific evidence.
And I'm saying that is a factually...
And he's saying that there is scientific evidence.
There is scientific evidence. There is overwhelming scientific evidence.
And this
basics... No. This is like saying the sky is not blue. Like, it is genes that code their skin color, right? Those genes are obviously different in them than they are in us. How is that not science? That's just like a basic fact. The genes that code their skin color, their level of melanin production, are different from my genes that code melanin production.
And that's precisely why I was asking this question, because I think for some people that do believe, like you, that people are genetically different, that has historically been used to promote racial hierarchies, right? And that's why I'm asking you, because
no differences between different groups of people. None. Appealing to the authorities. Nope, this is the science. This is the science. It's not the science, but she read it once, and that's all she knows. You could explain things to a toddler better than you can to a reporter. And again, she doesn't even get the real pushback. The guy concedes, like, oh, well, there's no evidence for genetic differences in intelligence, which isn't really true. But leave that aside. Leave that aside. We're just repudiating the entire idea of genetics now. But does she actually believe in it? Well, she believes in race in one extent because she's got a book coming out. What is this book called? Defectors, The Rise of the Latino Far Right. So yeah, she does. And what does it mean to believe in race? You owe certain loyalty on a racial basis to one political party. But at the same time, you also have to believe Latinos don't even exist because there are no differences. Maybe anyone can be Latino. Maybe I'm Latino, and that's why I'm on the far right. Nothing matters. Words mean nothing. We can't make any judgments. But also, at the same time, if you are non-white and you aren't backing the left, you are a race traitor. This is how it works. And you have to hold all these ideas at the same time. Now, of course, I'd respond that if this is even true, then whites who don't support the right are also race traitors. But of course, the rebuttal to that would be treason the whiteness as loyalty to humanity. Of course, as we've seen, invoking humanity or universal love or equality or anything else that's just unlimited in scope tends to be a cover for defending very particular interests, including one's own pocketbook or the racial group that one likes. Now, Scott Greer has a new piece in the American Conservative about the failed state of Minnesota. Just a couple paragraphs here. This was once one of America's whitest states, with far more Scandinavians than the descendants of slaves. It was, and still is, one of the more progressive states in the Union. The lack of awareness of the dangers of diversity seemingly encouraged white liberals in the state to try their hand at Scandinavian-style social democracy. Just like in Sweden, it drew some of the worst migrants in the world. Ordinary Minnesotans now pay the price. The state stands rightfully in President Donald Trump's crosshairs over its massive Somali welfare fraud scandal. Minnesota demonstrates what happens when socialism, immigration worship, and other leftist neuroses take over an entire state. And I think that's a critical point. This is a neuroses. This is what's really happening here. It's not a rational approach to policy because at this point, everybody sees the problem, but they can't back away from it. Their whole identity depends on it. And a little later, Scott notes, but the Floyd riots did not create the state's woes. They only exposed and exacerbated them. Minnesota's core problems are its welcoming attitude toward migrants and its generous welfare system. Minnesota is one of the top destinations for refugee resettlement in America. This is due to its relatively low cost of living and the state's eagerness to take in these migrants. Its refugee focus makes it one of the rare states with more African migrants than Hispanic newcomers. It's also why so many Somalis live there. The East Africans began moving to the state in the 1990s, drawn by its hospitality to such migrants. Nearly 80,000 Somalis now live in the North Star state. That's probably an underestimate. The hospitality wasn't just a friendly attitude evidenced by its residents. The state also offered substantial benefits to migrants. The Brookings Institution ranks the state as being one of the generous states in terms of its social safety net. Immigrants have taken full advantage of it, as evidenced by the insane welfare fraud scandal. Somali scammers were able to exploit the state's resources and extract an estimated $1 billion from taxpayers. Again, that's also an underestimate. Some people in the White House are saying it's billions and billions more. Now, this is the core question. It is because of this fraud. It is because of the pattern of criminal behavior. It is because it makes things worse that progressives can't back away from it. Why? This is the question. In many ways, it's very similar to that reporter refusing to acknowledge that there's even such a thing as physical differences between people. Why? Once you open that door, everything else breaks down. And again, some of you out there might be creationists, and I don't want to offend people. I'm not trying to pick a fight here, but if you've ever debated with a young earth creationist, you'll notice they can't concede even the slightest point. What about these fossils? Oh, Satan put him there to test the faith. Because if you concede something that this little thing is real, the whole thing breaks down. And this is the key. They're right. In a political sense, you are right not to concede anything at all, even if you're objectively wrong. The evangelicals that everybody makes fun of for saying this kind of stuff, they're right, because once you concede certain points, you inevitably end up where the churches are today, which do more harm than good from a Christian perspective. It was the people who opened up the door to certain ideas and saying, well, I'll concede that point, I'll concede this point. That's where they end up now. These egalitarians are not going to make the same mistake. They are right not to let an iota of doubt in. They are right not to let a single thing be up to question. They are right to demand a perfect statement of faith. And they are right to be willing to use hate and violence and oppression and unlimited self-righteousness against enemies who question it, like ICE agents, like President Trump, like you and me. They believe in it, and they believe in it fanatically because, one, it's impossible, and so it can never really be disproven. That's the great thing about egalitarianism. You can never quite get there. So the dream is always over the horizon. The ideal lives on forever. The dream never dies, as Ted Kennedy famously said. And two, more cynically, they materially benefit from it. That is the most powerful combination in politics. An impossible dream, and you get paid for believing in it. So you never actually win, you never give up the fight, and also your livelihood depends on believing this impossible thing. How are you going to fight that? People are going to support ideas that get them money and power, and they are eventually going to sincerely believe in it. Main takeaway is this idea that you can just be anti-white. You don't have to apologize for being white. Okay, that's good. But that kind of middle ground is ultimately untenable. Ideas get taken to their logical conclusion. Vance right now is getting hammered by both sides for going halfway. And maybe he has to do that politically. I'm not well, he needs to go all the way to our position. The man's trying to be president. He's the vice president right now. He certainly can't contradict anything his boss says. I understand why he's doing what he has to do, not to mention his marital situation. But it's not going to stop there. It's certainly not going to stop there for most of us, for society. Because inexorably, this ends up one of two ways. You're pro-white or you're anti-white. There is no middle ground. The liberal belief in colorblindness, the idea that we're all equal, that we just need to get rid of discrimination, leads inexorably to anti-white hatred. And the only way to meaningfully oppose it is to be pro-white. We are our ancestors. We don't make up our own identity. Politically, we share the same fate. And fundamentally, it's not whether you agree with me in some biological or metaphysical or spiritual sense. If you disagree with me on that, you're wrong, but fine, you can believe whatever you want. Politically, this is the only way out. Your identity is partially about how power treats you. This is where we have to be. And if we don't end up here, if we don't end up in an explicitly pro-white stance, we're just going to get eaten. There is nothing inherent to the model developing in areas like Minnesota that means it's going to break down. This can go on for a very long time. There is much ruin in the nation, as Adam Smith said, and no one learned anything from Zimbabwe. There is no bottom limit. It just rolls on and on and on and on. You have to defeat it. Now look, this is being recorded on Christmas Eve, so obviously this is going to be a shorter episode because I want to let you guys go. We'll be rolling out a lot more live streams and content and such when we get back, especially when the new year comes around. But I want to tell you, this isn't about like, well, go home and relax with your family and have fun, drink eggnog, whatever. No. Quite the opposite. You need to understand that everything you value on nights like tonight, family, friends, home, community, this is all at stake. You don't automatically get to win. Nobody is coming to save you, either on earth or from heaven. And the only way out of this is through solidarity as a people, as a race, as a nation. Yeah, we're not doing white guilt anymore. That's a start, but it's only a start. In 2026, we have to go beyond that. We have to get to white identity, and eventually, white sovereignty. Merry Christmas, Happy Yule. See you next time.